It was interesting what Chris said at the end of her welcome there. She probably doesn't even know she said it, but she was talking about barking up the wrong tree. And that was very interesting that she said that for me tonight, because really that's what I want to talk to you about, is this idea of how we can sometimes in life bark up the wrong tree. And just to give you a background, at the very, very, very beginning of the Bible, you may well have all heard the story of Adam and Eve, and they were put in there in this garden by God that had all the perfect conditions and everything you could wish for in a society, in an environment. And God put 2 trees in this garden, and he said, there's a tree of life, I want you to eat of that tree, I want you to go for life, I want that to be your choice all the way. But he also put another tree, which was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the sort of right and wrong tree. And he said, I actually don't want you to go there. I don't want you to measure your life by the rights and by the wrongs. And I've been thinking about this a lot this week, and about how much of the time I measure myself on whether I am right or wrong, in the sense of whether I'm getting things right or getting things wrong. And I want to share a little bit of where I've got to in my head about this. And it's lovely, the idea that I'm a signpost tonight, because I'm not sure I'm going to get you to a destination, but I'm definitely going to set you off on a direction that we may well need to have more conversation about. So as it was Eurovision night, I was thinking, what are my memories of Eurovision? And what sprung to mind was, first of all, I'm going to show my age now, and some of you won't know what I'm talking about, Bucks Fizz Making Your Mind Up. Who remembers that one? 1981, I was 6, and my sister was 8. And so, of course, this was, can you believe it, before even video, let alone iPods, all of those things. This was even before video, so you'd have to wait on a Thursday night on Top of the Pops and hope it came on. But there was the wonderful thing where the 2 girls wore long skirts, do you remember? And halfway through the song, all of a sudden, they must have had Velcro, mustn't they? The long skirts came off and they were wearing a dress. So, of course, me and my sister, we were Bucks Fizz, and we would put my mum's skirt over our clothes and spin round, and it would come off. And then the next year, 1982, was Bardo, less well known. Show that picture, will you, Phil? Does anyone remember Bardo? Oh, look, Ruth's going, yes, I do. I'm not sure it's anything for us to be proud of. That is a picture of my first record, not cassette, not CD, not iTunes track, record, and it had that cover on. And that I laughed because that picture on the right, did anybody else's family have one of those really massive, stack system? We thought it was brilliant. It was massive. And it had your record player, your cassette. Who had one of them? Come on, 80s stack. You're missing out, you people with your iPods that are only that big. Honestly, this was a deal to have. And she had that off-the-shoulder look. So Mum would have petticoats, and she let us cut holes in the sleeve, and we would put it over, and we were Bardo. And it got me thinking that when we were playing at this, we weren't playing. We were actually Bucks Fizz, and we were Bardo. I mean, Benji's Sporticus tonight, Daniel went through his Sporticus phase, and those of you with young kids or grandkids, you'll have heard of Lazy Town. So everywhere we went, he'd have his Sporticus outfit on, and Sporticus doesn't just walk. In between each movement, Sporticus does his like this. So we'd be in the supermarket aisles, and we'd say, come on, Daniel, and he'd go, and he was Sporticus for about 6 months of his life, because kids can go to that place, can't they, and it's all very alive. Now, it got me thinking, when do we grow out of that? So I'm not going to do myself any favours tonight with my reputation, but hey-ho, we're not supposed to have one, are we? But as I tracked this through, I thought, where else did my imagination take me? And we used to go to holidays in the south of France, and we used to travel with the caravan all the way to the south of France. And my sister would sit in the middle, before seatbelts. I mean, how did we get away with that? Before seatbelts. She'd sit in the middle, jabbering away to Mum and Dad. I would sit in the back, plugged into my Walkman, listening to the Nolan sisters, thank you for the music, and I was lead singer Nicola, don't ask me why, I was lead singer called Nicola, who had a twin brother called Craig, don't ask me why. We lived in the Pearsons' house, who were a family from church, and I always really liked their house, and all the way to the south of France and back, I was Nicola the pop star. It wasn't the Nolan singing, it was me, in my imagination. And then, of course, you evolve, don't you? And it goes on. And Some of you young girls will recognise this. You have your first boyfriend, and at 16, you're married off and you've named all your children. And that's all very, very real. And I remember weeping to Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, when I was dumped after 2 weeks. I was quite devastated, because everything I do for you wasn't true of this boy. He dumped me and I'd named children. I thought it was me. Now, we go down these places, don't we? But what I've had to come to realise was that all this escapism, I also did imagine things with God. I made, as well, in my younger years, I had a version of God that was my made-up version of God in some ways. Some lovely memories I have now of things that I look back and think, really? Was that really real? And the biggest of which, I even stood on this platform 10 years ago, and I told you all that God had told me that I was going to have 3 children, and when I was going to have 3 children, what their names were. I have 1 child. So what was all that about? And it got me really thinking, this voice that I have attributed to God lot of my life, was that any more real than me being Bardo, Bucks Fizz, a Nolan sister? Or any of those other things that you made up? Which was real and which wasn't real? Now, once you start going down there and trying to work out what was I right about, what was I wrong about, you can get yourself in a right little pickle, as I have discovered. And I've been thinking about a lot of this, because really that voice, that God in my life, was of tremendous comfort to me from the age of about 12. And I wasn't one of those people that sort of did my own thing and then sort of God was added on. I was all in this thing from quite a young age. I mean, I made major decisions on this thing, where I was going to live, who I was going to be with, how that was going to look, what jobs I was going to take. It's actually been the voice I've listened to. So what if that voice turns out to have been wrong? Are you getting the idea? Dramatic pause while I drink water. Now, the conclusion, I'll cut to the conclusion. Oh, look, I liked this today. No, you're wrong. So just sit there in your wrongness and be wrong. And when I saw that today, I thought, actually, I felt like that. Sometimes, somehow or other, I went wrong. I was here, I knew what to expect, I knew what it looked like, and now it's all gone wrong. Now, the conclusion I'm going to cut to, and I'll explain it a bit after I've almost given it you, is that if we're not called to eat from the right or wrong tree, it doesn't matter if I was wrong. It actually doesn't matter if I was wrong. Now, I can hear some of you, your heads turning like, oh, but it matters. We need to know what's right. We need to know what's wrong. And I'm with you, except I've got a little bit further, and now I think I'm all right with not knowing, because it only matters if I have to understand the rights and wrongs of life, and if I can measure that. And if I eat from that tree. Now, this is what I've written here. It feels like it matters, because without this, I am left without certain things to expect, without a formula for my life, without controllable guarantees. If I do this, I get that. If I don't do this, I don't get that. And I'm left with the need for faith. So it matters if I'm right or wrong, if I want to live in a system where I can be certain, but actually it doesn't matter if I'm all right living by faith. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh, this massively matters, things should be right if they're right, they should be wrong if they're wrong, we should know where we stand, we should know what's what, and we should know what the consequences are. The truth is, what that exposes in us is we don't want to live a life of faith. We actually want to live a life of formula and how we know. Now, this is what Chris said already tonight, the church's job, if we're to be a sign of the kingdom, it's not our job to pin down every single thing about kingdom, because we actually can't do that, because there's something going to be massively mysterious about that. But it's our job to signpost those things. And I've had moments in my life, as you will have done, where I have known and heard and understood Father God. And I have had those moments, I still have those moments, where you know it's an absolute revelation. And some of those moments I've gone with and responded to, and others of the moments I've completely ignored because it hasn't suited me at the time and I haven't wanted to hear that, as you have. There's been other moments where I have known I have so needed to believe that something was true that I have manufactured in my own mind what the truth must be. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking to those of us who believe in God. Sometimes we could be talking to those of you tonight who don't believe in God at all. Some of you need there not to be a God so much that you won't be prepared to ask whether there is one. Because for your life to work as it is, it needs to not be true. Others of us need God to so look a certain way to hold up everything that we have built our life on that we have to keep that the truth, because otherwise we lose our sense of certainty and we might have to feel a little bit less certain about life and walk a little bit more by faith. Now, this was a question that I read in a book when I was reading yesterday. I think it'll come on the screen. Where is God when his answers defy all of my most cherished convictions about him? So when I have believed and been all in, and at that point, what God's response to me doesn't seem to be what I've believed him to be, where do I go then? How does light work then? Now again, it doesn't matter if I eat at the life tree. If everything's going to be about life, it matters a lot if I eat at the right or wrong tree. Now, bear with me. I know I'm making your head go a bit. That's all right. Signposting. This is where we go. If I had got that right, I wouldn't be here in this situation. And we beat ourselves up. If I just got that right, if I just managed to get that right, I wouldn't be here. If that other person had not got things so wrong, I wouldn't be here in this situation. But what if all of the situations that are in your life right now have been absolutely perfected because right now is the moment that Jesus can work with in your life? What if right now it doesn't matter who got what right or who got what wrong, but what matters more is, will we accept the grace available to us now? What if that's what matters? Not tracing it all back and working out where we're to blame and who's responsible, but if we're measured not by the good that we do, but by the grace that we accept, in any given moment we have a perfect opportunity to accept grace and live and have life. Now, if my choices are not leading to life, then the only way out of that is not by working out what I'm getting wrong and somehow trying to fix it in my own strength, but it's to accept the grace to help me to make new choices. And where I am making great choices, really the appropriate response is to be grateful for all the grace on my life that has somehow enabled me to somehow position myself to make great choices. So whichever way you go, it all comes down to grace. My life cannot be measured by my rights and wrongs. I am not the sum total of my rights and wrongs in life. Because if I've got things right, is that me that's done that right? Or is it because my parents raised me really well and because I was given this kind of upbringing, or because I ended up in this church or this job? Which bit's mine and which bit would we be attributing to other people's input in my life? I am the sum total of everything that has been invested in me, the good, the bad and the ugly. So which bits am I going to take credit for to somehow measure, oh, I must be getting this right? Isn't the whole expression in my life an expression of grace that has been gifted to me, however that's come in whatever form? Now, we want to keep this system of being right or wrong if we believe that how right we are outweighs how wrong we are. Because I liked growing up and being a good girl. I was a really good girl. And if you were to look down all the various things I've done in life, you would think she was a really good girl. I liked being a good girl because it made me feel good and it made me feel valued. And then the point came in life where I couldn't get it right. I couldn't. I hit some stuff that I could not get past. And that absolutely destroyed me, partly because I wanted to be able to be right and good and all those other things. But actually, if you have this system where that's the formula you're using for life, When a crisis of faith comes, the truth is you haven't developed any faith because you've been busy with your formulas. So when you have to work out of what you can't see and you don't know and you're not certain about and you can't control and you can't understand, you can't do it. And then you're in a real crisis. It made me think about regret, really, because I don't know how many of you sitting there would say, I've got regrets about my life. It's quite a, what do you regret? If you could go back in your time machine and change things, what would you change? And I thought, well, even that, we're looking back on the things we think we got wrong, aren't we? You have to bark up the wrong tree to even regret. And regret, when I looked it up, meant to feel sad, repentant, or disappointed over. And so I thought, well, did God regret anything? And the only time I could find the word regret linked to God was when he said he regretted making man, when he flooded the earth and Noah had his ark and all of that business. You can read it in Genesis 6. And I thought God regretted making man, somehow felt sad, repentant, or disappointed over a choice that he had made. Now, it says this in 2 Corinthians 7. It talks about a distress that drives us to God. And it says this kind of distress turns us round. It gets us back in the way of salvation. We never regret that kind of pain. But those who let distress drive them away from God are full of regrets, and they end up in a deathbed of regrets. I thought, oh, crikey. So if regret in your life, if the things you think you've got wrong leads you to that place where you feel guilty all the time, and it drives you from God if you have a God who is focused on your wrongdoing. If you're barking up the tree that says God's into where I'm getting it wrong, you are always going to be driven away from that God because you're always going to feel like you've somehow got it wrong. And once you've got it wrong, how do you go back and get it right? Because you can't, can you? But if regret leads you to a Father where there's a tree of life, then that's at the point where you actually can believe you can be restored and you can have tremendous hope. Because actually, even if you've made a decision that has not benefited you or anybody else, the last word hasn't been spoken, and there may well be another word after that. So actually, you can still move with your life. So you're not driven away from a God who's going to condemn you, but to a Father who's going to embrace you, speak another word over your life and move you on. Now in Genesis 6, after it says God regretted making man, he makes a covenant with man and says, I'm not going to do this anymore. I almost thought it's like he's saying, I'm going to have no more regret over man. I am in this now. For better, for worse, the good, the bad, the ugly, the covenant I'm making with you today, I'm never, ever going back on. He's absolutely all in. No matter what happens, me and humanity, we're never going back. We're in this thing. And some of you are so angry at yourself tonight and so angry at others, and you're absolutely full of regrets. And you're stuck. You end up on a deathbed of regrets, end up stuck there. But what does it say? Forgetting what is behind, we're going to press on to take hold of that for which Christ took hold of us. So tonight, if you've hit a crisis of faith, you need to choose tonight what that distress is going to do. Will it turn you round? Because what you've realised is the worst mistake of your life is not bigger than the last word on your life and the word that God can still speak after that? Or are you going to dwell on what went wrong, what you've not got right, feel sorry for yourself, end up on that deathbed of regrets and die there, barking up the wrong tree, literally thinking this thing I've got wrong is the thing now that has ruined my life? You don't have to bark up that tree. I have made, like you, some almighty mistakes. And things that have left me very sad and disappointed, mostly because I really wanted to get it right. I've made a lot of mistakes trying to get it right. So I don't know what happens with people who don't mind. Thinking, I tried really hard to get it right and I got it all wrong. It doesn't work. That tree doesn't work. Now, it doesn't matter if it's not the tree where I'm going to eat from. Maybe I am wrong and have been wrong. Maybe you are wrong and you are wrong. Maybe we didn't get what we expected from God, because we wanted the God that we made to be the God that was going to do it. But maybe all of that being wrong is absolutely overrated and irrelevant. Maybe none of that matters today as we stand here or as you sit there. Am I saying that people doing wrong things doesn't matter? There's a can of worms. Let's look at it momentarily, this can of worms, by using a picture that Jenny retweeted on Twitter or Facebook. I saw this picture this morning. Did you remember sending this round? I saw this picture on Facebook, and that is a soldier. And the little girl is holding, her family were all massacred. And she was shot in the head, but it didn't kill her. She survived. And he was a soldier. I think it was in Iraq, wasn't it, 4 years ago. And the only thing that comforted this little girl was this soldier. And so this post was talking about amazing soldiers, and he slept holding her like that for 4 nights to comfort her. And you think, that's terrible. And of course you look at that and you think, that's not okay. That's not okay. But what struck me was that the person who'd been sending this round, this has been going around Facebook and the internet for 4 years, because this was March 2010. So for the last 4 years, the message that is coming through this picture is not how wrong this was, but even in the wrongness, look at what hope and life can come from it. And we can spend our days looking at everything that is wrong about the world, about life, about people, about things that are going on, or we can find that glimmer that says, look at the grace and love and life of a man who would say, this little girl has had something happen to her that should not have happened, but I am going to do what I can to enrich her life. What if we actually dwelt on that? What if we actually decided that whenever we see something wrong, rather than eat from that, we think, I'm going to introduce life into this situation. I'm going to introduce hope. I'm going to speak a word over this that leaves it with some potential to grow something amazing. Jesus was in a situation once where he was in a really tricky situation, and he says, what shall I say that I don't want this? And that God, get me out of this. And he says, no. Instead, he says, God, put your glory on display. And in any given situation, there is an opportunity for God's glory to be on display. Now, I'll bring this to a close. But I know I made a version of God that made me incredibly comforted and helped me immensely. And I know that I've been, like some of you, in a long process of having that God dismantled to encounter something that's the real deal. And there's a story in the Bible about Elijah who, he looks for God one day, and there's a massive wind and there's all this noise and racket, and he doesn't find God there, but he finds God in a quiet, still whisper. And I have to say that sometimes the voice of God in my life is a much quieter whisper than all that noise and racket I made with the God that was my one I'd made. My God I'd made was quite vocal. He had a lot of opinions about things, and he told me them quite regularly. But the actual real deal God sometimes comes a little bit more subtly, a little bit as a whisper. But what I've found is, even though it's not more dramatic, it is still enough. There's a story in the Bible of a woman who says, do you know what, Jesus? Even if I get the crumbs off your table, that would be enough for me. And the woman who touches the hem of Jesus' garment, and she's made whole. And the truth is, we're not invited to have the crumbs. We're actually invited to be at the banquet. But if my revelation of an authentic Father means I have to pick it up a crumb at a time, that's still going to be more satisfying than anything that I might have made and manufactured for myself. So are you prepared to have been wrong the whole time? Or do you need to have been right? The truth is, both of those are absolutely dead-end questions. We're measured by the grace that we accept, not by how right or wrong we've been. I read this today. It says, I rest where I trust. And what if I can't trust myself or the God I've made? What if by me asking you these questions tonight make you think, all right, I'm not sure where I stand then. This was the one thought I wanted to end with tonight. A God who's into the right and wrongs and a formula is going to feel like a very safe God, because he will usually agree with you because you're making him. There's this wonderful line in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe where Lucy asks Mr. Beaver about Aslan, who represents Christ. And she says, is he safe? And Mr. Beaver says, safe? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. And I thought, And you know, real deal God isn't always safe because he asks you to do stuff by faith, but he is good. And perhaps we all have a few of our fairy tales to question, but he is good. And so as I told you I wouldn't get you to a destination, so at least I'm honest. But as I've signposted for you today, what I want you to be willing to think about is, are you willing to not measure your life by the rights and wrongs, but actually to measure your life by a grace that you're willing to accept on your life? So if you're sitting there tonight thinking, I've got everything wrong, it doesn't matter. If you're sitting there tonight thinking, I've done everything right, it doesn't matter. What matters is, are you willing to accept grace on your life as a gift so that you can live today? And all of that other stuff doesn't matter unless we bark up the wrong tree and think that that's the story. So I'm going to let you unpick all this, because I may well have confused everybody. But I think it's worth thinking about, because I want real deal, and I think you guys want that too. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Loving the journey. One thing I've discovered, if you want to build a group of people numerically, set down the requirements, the rules, the regulations, what's expected, what's not expected, is a good way, because human nature says we want it to be that way. How we arrived there from supposedly reading the Bible is completely beyond me. And the more I walk this journey, the more I realize that and appreciate loving the journey, loving what Jen says. And just wanted to close by simply saying this. You may think, I wish I wasn't here. I don't necessarily mean in the rock tonight, but in your life, I wish I wasn't here. Well, you are. Get used to it. You are. That there's nothing you can do to change the fact that you are where you are. And what's happened to you has happened to you. Your decision comes in what Jen says in that, not about the rights and wrongs of how you got there, but understanding something that the Bible is about. The Bible is about something called resurrection. The whole completion of the message of Jesus was built on resurrection. Resurrection is life from the dead. Resurrection says, it doesn't matter what got you here and how you managed to die, the truth is dead things can live again. And I have a phrase that I've coined over this last year, which is this, that I can tell you what your past has done. I can tell every one of you exactly what your past has done. Do you want to know? He brought you to today. Every one of us are the same. Your past brought you to today. That's not the issue. The issue is, now that you're at today, what now? Going to sit like Jen says and try and figure out the rights and wrongs of how you got to today? Or are you going to say, okay, I am where I am, but the truth of the gospel is resurrection, life from the dead. The truth is, all death does is produce an echo of our past. You ever been to a funeral? Do we talk about the person's future? Or do we talk about the person's past? So that's nothing to do with resurrection. The problem is we get stuck at that point of thinking, I wish I wasn't here, life's terrible, it's death, and we become an echo of our past. We only think of our past. But you see, the whole issue of this is the declaration of hope about your past may have brought you to this day, but resurrection says that's not the last word. Hope says there's something beyond this. Hope says instead of figuring out the rights and wrongs that got me to today, faith says there is life in dead things. Resurrection is a trumpet call of hope. And God sent Jesus to bring a trumpet call of hope. Now, secular religion only gives you an echo on your past. It tells you what you have done. It's an echo on your past. It's full of death. But the resurrection is a trumpet call of hope. And Jesus says, come live again. So your past brought you to today. So this is where you are. So this is what's happened. But come live again. There's life beyond. There's life beyond. And the wonderful truth of what Jen has said is you never find that life by figuring out what's right and wrong. You find that life by saying, I don't know if I could have done anything about where I've got to. I'm where I am. I'm dead in where I am. But I believe in the power of resurrection. My faith is not in the echo of what has happened, but in the trumpet call of what can happen, because Christ is on the scene. So I want to pray for you tonight. You may want to receive that. As we just bow our heads, I'd like for you to receive that resurrection life. That's really what the gospel is about. It's about receiving that resurrection. It's about receiving that hope that says this is not the last word. There's one beyond this. And the truth is, if life can come to the dead, then all things are possible to him who believes. That there's no failure in our life too big. There's no disaster too great. There's no sickness too powerful. There's no despair too deep. Nothing. Because if resurrection is true, and death is the ultimate for humanity, resurrection says that anything that's going on in your life does not have to be the last word, but life can come to you. So as I pray, I want you just to receive. Some of you need to just know that your heart, your spirit, your life has received the grace that God has given to you. Just receive it tonight. Some of you need a miracle, a physical miracle. You need it in your body. You need health. Receive it. That's what the resurrection is. Some of you need condemning things to be broken in your mind. You receive it. That's what resurrection does. And we're going to pray right now. Father, in the name of Jesus, I just release your resurrection truth and your resurrection power and the grace that comes from that into this place tonight, in every heart that's crying out to you. I thank you that this is not the last word, that all that we need to say about our past is it brought us to today. It has no greater significance than that. It brought us to this day, but this day is where we find you, and that is not the end. But resurrection is your promise in our lives. We receive the resurrection that you assured us of through Jesus stepping out of the tomb, to know that nothing is stronger than the resurrection life that comes from you through Jesus to us by grace, not by our works, not by our figuring what's right and wrong, but simply by receiving that you said it is finished, and it is. I just release life across this congregation tonight, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right, I think we're done. So whatever it is that's going to go on, I guess it's going to go on, and we love you being here, and if we can help you in any way, love to chat with you. Other than that, we will get on with this Eurovision thing. Culture. How many of you remember Cliff Richard? It's getting old now, isn't it? How long ago was Lulu? Is she recent? Or forgettable? Cilla Black, did she do it? She didn't do it. Hecky thump. All right, you're blessed. Like I say, if we can help you in any way, just come and chat to us. Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate that tonight. And thanks, the guys, and we'll see you again. All right. Hope you come back after Eurovision. All right, we're done.